This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 153, recorded April 26th, 2018. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of, and here's the story here, TheTotalScreen.com. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me say the official podcast of TVenthusiast.com. Well, we've recently split off from TV Enthusiast. We've kind of gone our own way. We're carrying on the podcast as usual. We're going to be doing it kind of the same way, but our new site is going to be at TheTotalScreen.com. So check that out, all lowercase, all like one word.com. And that's where we're going to be from now on. So our YouTube channel is still in the same space, but it's renamed. Our RSS feed for the podcast is still going to be the same. So if you subscribe to it, you don't have to find it. You don't have to find it again. It's still going to be continuing into the same feed. So you shouldn't have to do anything there. But from now on, for the actual content of the site, it is going to be TheTotalScreen.com. So, welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am Tyson, your host, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hi!
So, today we're going to be talking about Lost in Space and Legion, as we have for the last couple weeks. But now we have our third show as well that's joined our lineup, which is Westworld. So, we're going to be talking about those three shows. So, let's kick things off right away. Lost in Space, Season 1, Episode 2, Diamonds in the Sky. This episode most of it took place away from the Robinson family and dealing with Dr. Smith, who we had seen at the end of the last episode.
Yeah, it kind of picks up from the end of the last episode with Dr. Smith and the other guy.
Don West,
who, I don't think they name him in the episode, right? So,
it's we saw West on his uniform.
Okay.
But it's Don West. He's a character from the original series, too.
Yep. So they crash land on the same planet, pretty much on the other side of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, most of the episode is them just trucking through, trying to find if there's anybody else on the planet.
Salvaging materials and clothes where they can.
They find a woman who Don West initially, presumes dead, but she turns out to be alive.
But she's unconscious through the whole episode.
She's unconscious through the whole episode. But Don West kind of takes her. Meanwhile, he puts up this front about he doesn't give a shit about anybody but himself, when clearly that's not true. And
Dr. Smith is trying to kind of break through that to him.
Yeah, trying to kind of break through to that. I think she's sizing him up and seeing how she can exploit or manipulate him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what she's doing.
While this is happening, the Smiths are going through their ship. Thanks to the robot now, they can get into their ship again, and they're basically getting rid of all the water and cleaning it up and trying to salvage the ship. And while doing that, somebody, I think it was Penny, notices an explosion in the distance and alerts them to it. They figure out that it's a ship. Another ship that's crashed. So John, Maureen, and Will Robinson all decide that they're going to go look through the site and see if there's any survivors and try to, figure out what to do from there. So they go off, the three of them as well as the robot. I think part of it, particularly John, wanted to keep his eye on the robot. He's just not trusting Will's robot, and he knows that as long as Will's going, the robot's going. So he's if he's going to go, he wants the robot to be in his eye line.
Right, exactly. It's fair to not trust the robot because, this is who knows what the hell this thing is, right?
Yeah, it's really freaky and it's powerful.
It gets them back into their, ship safely this time without the threat of freezing over. And basically they go to work on, salvaging what they can and trying to get the ship out of the icy lake.
They end up taking off to try to find other survivors. And when they do, they leave Penny and the other girl, I forgot her name, behind in the ship, basically saying, hey, just kind of every so often, run the engines, get it just a little bit closer to the surface at a time, take it easy, and then you'll get out of the ice eventually, and we'll be back and continue working on that, basically. So this is kind of like the family splits up here with them going that way. The Robinsons go to investigate the crash site where they saw another one of the Jupiters crash. No survivors. They're not really having any luck with that. Not really finding much worth salvaging either. But then they end up, when they're there, Maureen, the mom, ends up convincing Will to get the robot to take them to the alien ship, because she wants to explore it and figure out what's there. So they do that. They get there, and John and Maureen, they're in the alien ship, and they see a really cool map. They get the first instance that they have that they're outside of the galaxy, that they know, they're outside of the Milky Way.
And they're like, well, how the hell did that happen, right?
Yeah, they see the ship has this really cool map thing that's a giant hologram that they can interact with, and so they're like, okay, that's pretty cool. While they're doing that, Will and the robot outside,
they're trying to bond
out there, and they end up touching this piece of metal at the same time from the ship, which somehow causes Will to be able to see archival footage.
I don't know, it's weird because he becomes psychically bonded to the robot or something, because the robot seizes up and its face starts glowing red, and it starts having those memories of killing all the people back on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
and Will sees all of this, and it freaks him out. He runs away. He doesn't trust the robot anymore, and then he tests the robot's loyalty to him, by telling him to walk off a cliff. And when the robot is about to walk off, he's like, no, don't,
Yeah, that's the two kind of interesting things that came from that. One was the robot just being basically completely bonded to Will now, apparently. And the other thing is that we had assumed that this other robot that we had seen at the end of the first episode was a different robot as part of this collective. And now it seems like it's the exact same robot.
Yeah, it seems like it's the same robot. So that's interesting.
So we had assumed that there were more robots out there. Now it seems like it's very likely there might only be that one, at least there on that planet.
Yeah, at least on that planet. Yeah, it seems like that's it.
So while this is happening, Will's kind of freaking out with this and learning how to deal with that, and his parents are checking out the other stuff. Penny, over in the main ship in the Jupiter, notices a storm on the horizon. It looks really bad. That's heading towards where her family is.
Right. She tries to radio them, but they're out of range.
Yeah.
So she can't get in touch with them. So
she has an argument with her sister and ends up kind of against her sister's will, forcing the Jupiter to raise to the ice's level, to get to sea level, which was risky. It could have sunk their ship and crushed their ship, but it didn't. It didn't end up doing that, and she got it to the surface, and she did that so that she could take out what's basically a rover. They call it a chariot, out and look for them or try to get closer to get in range. And she has to kind of put it together. Her sister was originally going to drive it, but her sister's been really reluctant to go out. She's really kind of freaked out from her experience, almost freezing to death and drowning in that.
Right. She's having some PTSD from that.
Yeah. But Penny kind of takes the reins of the chariot and just takes off without her sister and goes off to try to find her family. So she's going off and looking for her family. And we see this chariot's pretty versatile and can kind of get around pretty well. Which
it has a snow weather mode, which she uses to drive down this cliff, this hill.
Yeah, it's very rough. It's not what you would normally think is being traversable.
Right. Exactly.
But she's kind of making it at ease with this chariot, which she wasn't sure how to drive it. Now she's kind of doing that. So she's looking for her family and still calling out on the radio for them. Eventually, the Robinsons that are out there exploring, they start seeing that the storm is coming. Then they get in contact with Penny, and Penny is able to find a way to save them. Basically, the robot flashes off this bright light. He becomes a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're able to get them into the rover because it's raining like diamonds.
Yeah, so it starts raining, and it's diamonds. So it's cutting them up,
Yeah.
Pretty bad. You don't want to be in a diamond storm.
Apparently the chariot's invulnerable to this stuff.
Thankfully, and the robot's also invulnerable, of course.
Yeah, and the robot is riding on the back of the chariot because it can't fit inside.
Before we go here, we should bring up that the last time we see Dr. Smith and the other guy,
West.
I will eventually remember his name. The last time we seen Dr. Smith and West, they were with the unconscious woman in a cave, right? And they only had one flare left. And Dr. Smith had made this big deal about this pendant she had, like a saint, one of those saint pendants. And
it played throughout the episode because she was wearing it, and West had used that to kind of like profile her.
Right. And she took advantage of that by making up some bullshit story. Because he profiled her, he guessed because she was a psychologist that she wasn't religious, and he asked her why she had it, and she came up with the story about it belonging to her dead brother, which I'm guessing is total bullshit story, but who knows?
Yeah, well, that comes into play later on too.
Right, but basically, once they get into this cave, they only have one flare left because they had 3, and West used 2 of them, looking for like any sign of other people already. And so they get into there, and Dr. Smith tells West that she lost her pendant, and it's sitting on a branch or something, like right outside of the cave. And so West goes and grabs it and gives it back to her, and she's like, "Thank you." And then she takes off, and she tells West, like, you can use the last flare, you'll know when to use it.
Yeah, she also gives him the pendant to fix for her because he said he would fix it for her.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she gives him the pendant to fix, and she tells him, like, you'll know when to use the last flare, don't worry. And she takes off.
She says she's going to look for help, and then
she says
bring them back to him.
Yeah, she says she's going to look for help and bring them back. So when we see the Robinson family in the rover, they see the flare go up, and they go to investigate it. So they see the flare, and it's Dr. Smith, and she claims to be all alone and that there's nobody else. And then that's when it's revealed, because they cut back to Dr. West in the cave, opening the flare case, and there's no flare or flare gun, know. And then they very explicitly show us what's happening, even though, like, you could have put that together without the show spelling it out for you, but whatever.
Yeah, they spell it out. They let you know that Dr. Smith used her pendant as a decoy in order to steal the flare and go and save herself, very coldly ignoring the other ones. But it's weird because almost immediately when she gets picked up by the Robinsons and she's in like the cart, she's like, "Oh, thank you so much." And she's talking to him and she's being introduced to him, and like it's very quickly in the background, but like she says something like, "Oh, thank you" to the one girl, and she's like, "Oh, and that's my brother Will." And she's like, "I wish I had a brother."
Yeah, she says, "I wish I had a brother." So you find out that her story was bullshit, which at that point you kind of figured, but
although anything she's saying from this point on is likely bullshit too. So
yeah, anything she's saying for this is likely bullshit too. She sees the robot and she recognizes.
Yeah, well, first you gotta say they made it back to the ship, to the Jupiter.
Yeah, that's after she's introduced this robot, and she has that look on her face like she recognizes it, and it's like, oh shit.
And Will's kind of like, "Oh no, it's okay," because I think Will's able to put together that she probably saw this robot and is trying to ensure her that this robot is fine.
No, I don't think it's that. I think Will probably like assumes that she sees it and she's intimidated by it because
of its appearance.
Its appearance. It's a strange robot that not even the Robinsons really know it too well, right? So like, of course you'd be a little intimidated and scared, and Will sees that and he tries to reassure her. So he thinks she's just intimidated by it because it is intimidating when she.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I think
how would Will
going to be that Smith is going to be able to hold this over Will at some point?
Because I don't know if Will saw Smith in his visions, in his robot visions or not. So I don't know if Will.
I think it's just they saw on her reaction.
Right, maybe.
But the reason I think that it's different than that is that I think they're setting it up that this is going to be something that will, because when he said like it's okay, he did it kind of very quietly, like in this kind of secretive kind of way. And I think that the setup is that this is going to be something that Dr. Smith has over Will, that she's going to use at some point, that his family doesn't know about this robot's like past and that how dangerous it is, and that Will's like hiding that information. So that's why I think that he's noticing some fear in her eyes that goes beyond just it being this foreign thing,
Right.
But that's just me. I could be wrong. That's pretty much it for the episode. That's Lost in Space Season 1, Episode 2, Diamonds in the Sky. We'll talk about the next episode next week. Next up, though, we have Legion Season 2, Episode 4, titled Chapter 12. Just makes it confusing because they're continuing on from the episode numbering from the first season. So it's Episode 4, Chapter 12. This is kind of funny, actually, because just 3 weeks ago, we did a whole discussion about Groundhog's Day episodes.
Right, and this is a Groundhog's Day episode. Surprise!
Yeah, this is like a unique Legion version of a Groundhog Day episode.
This is cool because if this was out a few weeks ago, we could actually used it on that podcast. It would have been a good candidate for that podcast. But alas, it did not exist when we did that podcast. So now it does. But this was a really cool episode because it continues immediately from the cliffhanger of last episode, where David goes into Sydney's mind to free her from the maze that everybody else was trapped in because of the monk, right? And while David had a bit of an easier time with the others, he's finding Sydney hard to crack and this is where the Groundhog's Day part of the episode comes in, because the gist is like he's watching Sydney's life unfold and he has to figure out the message of that, or like what Sydney's core issue is.
And when he gets it wrong, it kind of loops back to the beginning.
Yeah, because she says watch it again.
Yeah, and things don't happen differently, but we get more added to certain scenes on certain runs. So like one time we might just see like a real quick scene, and the next time we'll see like an extended version of that scene that gives some more details.
Yes.
So that's kind of how it plays with the like Groundhog Day storytelling mechanic. But basically, like I wrote down the kind of like the different places or locations and within this flashback thing, and there's where it always starts is there's like a fire inside an igloo.
Yes.
And that's in that snowy area, and that's representing kind of the womb.
Yeah, it's the womb because Sydney crawls out of it, the igloo, and then there's a flashlight, and then we see her birth. It's adorable too because like her whole thing is being touched, and so we see like the infant, the newborn, her mother's trying to touch her, and she cries as soon as she's touched, and then she's like happy as soon as she's not being touched.
Mm-hmm. And we see her as a baby being like heavily coddled, like wrapped tightly in blankets and placed in there. And that's when you see the thing with her aversion to being touched. And then you see a scene where like her mom is like she's laying in a bed and she's asleep, and her mom lays behind her but uses like a pillow to separate herself from her. Yeah. And kind of like cuddles with her. And then like she kind of smiles when her mom does that. And so going through this, like David's kind of reaction to this is he says like, okay, he's like, I get it. This is about you not wanting to be touched and stuff. And she's like, no, watch again. And it goes through and it goes through these different things. You see her getting bullied by some girls when she's like a little girl. Some other girls at her school are bullying her, talking about her father.
One of the first things we see when she's a teenager, she's at the museum with her mother, and the couple just like making out, just like really going at it, right? And she's like kind of staring at them. And then we see her, she kisses herself in the mirror, and like David comes to the conclusion, oh, that's what she wanted, right? And
that she wishes she could make a physical connection with people, but that she can't.
But she can't. But she says, nope, wrong, try again.
So you see, like I said, those girls that are bullying her. You see a guy that's like pressuring her into kissing him, and she says no, and then he reacts really badly badly to that. And then she sees the 3 girls that were bullying her, who are now older. These are all like that. When the girls were first bullying her, that was like, she was like a little girl. She was, but now she's like a teenager. And so they're like teenage girls. It's the same girls. And they walk by as this is happening. And so she says, oh, you want to kiss? Here, let's kiss. She kisses. She's able to kind of take control of his body as is her power, and just immediately walks up to the girls and starts attacking them.
Yeah, she just like beats them, you know.
Yeah, like savagely, and then blames it on the boy.
Yeah.
So they kind of like take him away. So the girls are beaten up, like savagely beaten up. The guy's like going to jail, you know. And so she's like manipulated this situation to her benefit.
Right.
So this is like, so David's kind of like a little bit shocked by this, and he's like, okay, you're trying to show me these negatives in your life, these things about you that you're afraid that I'll turn my back on you for, but I won't.
Right.
He's like, I'm so messed up, you know, like nothing you can show me is going to shock me and make me not love you. And she's like, nope, watch again. And so this is when you start to see things like her getting all kind of punked out and going to some punk rock concert. It seems like she's doing it because she's kind of like in the early version of what would come to be known as a mosh pit. And getting bumped by people and like making these real quick like transfers to other people that kind of like people like almost don't even notice that it's happening to them because they're so bumping into each other that it's just kind of passing from one to another really quick.
Right, exactly.
And it's giving her an experience to be touching people basically without, you know, being too much of a problem. And you see this kind of scene ends with, you see her like in like a psychiatric ward like bed with her mom like standing over her, which they never really touched on too much again. That part of it.
I don't think they go back to that in the episode at all.
Yeah, but just the idea is like that this leads to dark places or something, that this action.
Right, the bad places.
And then you see that she sees her mother hosting this party, and she's like trying on people's clothes that are like in the room, their coats and hats and stuff. And you see when she goes to this punk rock thing, and you see when she gets back and when she sees the boyfriend of her mom is like taking a shower, and her mom is laying on the couch, and you're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. She takes over her mom's body and goes and has sex with the boyfriend.
Right. And then the body switch wears off, and it ends up she's in the shower with the mom's boyfriend. So
we should note that that's a little weird aspect of her power too.
Yeah,
is that like she doesn't like warp back to her body with her mom having gotten off the couch, and then it's like she swaps bodies with the people, and then their bodies revert.
Yeah,
but they don't switch bodies back again. They like just their bodies revert into the other's body.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's kind of like a weird take on that ability, but because their power works in that way, when it wears off, she's in the shower with the boyfriend.
She's able to frame the boyfriend for pedophilia, basically.
Yeah,
and basically that's why she did it, right? To get rid of him.
Yeah, seemingly that, but also possibly just to be touched, you know, because that's part of her thing.
It seems like it, but then you realize, no, I think this was definitely a malicious act.
I think it was both. I think she was opportunistic in her way of getting rid of him. But so she used her power and that she had sex with the guy, got him busted. He gets taken away by the police. David's kind of a little bit set back by this. It's like, whoa, that was way darker. And finally, they end up having a conversation, and what ends up coming out of it is that Sydney has this very cynical view of life experiences and love and stuff. And what the message she's trying to get across seems to be that love isn't going to win them this fight.
Right.
And that the experiences that they have, good and bad, that they make you stronger. And being stronger makes you a better warrior, better suited to facing this fight. And that love isn't going to do it. And that's kind of the message she wanted to get to David. We should mention that while all of this is going on, everybody else woke up except the two of them. Because the guy had died.
Right.
The monk had died. So everybody woke up. But David and Sydney were still...
pointed out that David and Sydney were no longer, Sydney was no longer in the maze. So they weren't actually navigating the monk's maze at that point. This was something that Sydney came up with to make a point to David.
Yeah. This was all happening. Now David and Sydney come out of it, and as soon as they come out of it, there's like a commotion in Division 3, and so they get up and they're trying to figure out what's going on in the commotion, and they see Lenny being brought in custody.
Yep, Lenny in custody. I don't think it's the Shadow King. I think it's actually Lenny.
We'd seen in I think in the last episode or the episode before where Lenny was like pleading with the Shadow King to let her go back. Yeah.
So I think that's what happened, because although it could be the Shadow King in the form of Lenny, but I think it's just Lenny.
Yeah. So, but that's the end of Legion Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 12.
Kind of ends on another cliffhanger. But that's cool because it leaves us wanting more. It leaves us anticipating the next episode.
And that brings us to our final show of discussion, which is Westworld Season 2, Episode 1, Journey into Night.
Yes.
This episode, I just want to address right off the bat, has like at least 2 significant timelines.
Okay, yes, it does. And
so they have the timeline where the episode starts with Bernard waking up on the beach is actually like several weeks later.
Yeah, it's actually in the future
than what happened chronologically, you know?
And the thing about this is obviously no secret. Like there's clear delineations between this timeline and what's happening in the past, which is what's happening in the past is what happens directly after the end of last season, and then we got the part that happens a few weeks later with Bernard. But this isn't like they're trying to pull a fast one on you like so far. This is pretty straightforward. You know what's in the future and what's in the past. Like if you're paying
what you do is you have these things that are missing in the future, and you're like, well, where did this go? Like, you know, Bernard was with that one girl, Charlotte from Delos, and
well, he ends up on a beach, right? So like,
yeah, and then he's not with her. He's on a beach, like unconscious.
So
being found by people. So like, well, what happened to Charlotte?
So there's clear implication of there's something happens where Charlotte goes away, and well, at the very least, Charlotte and Bernard get separated, right?
Yeah, at the very least, if not more.
If not more, yeah. At the very least, they get separated because somehow Bernard ends up on this beach unconscious. And this is where, like, I don't know if, like, it's the CEO of Delos, but it's, like, pretty high up dude, right?
I think the CEO is actually the, what's it guy? Or at least he's just the chairman of the board, is the Man in Black.
Oh, I think Man in Black's just the chairman on the board or is, like, a member of the board. I don't think he's, like, the actual CEO.
I don't think this guy on the beach is either. I think he's, like, the corporate fixer.
Yeah, he's a pretty high up dude.
He's the Mike Ehrmantraut of this.
He finds Bernard, and you know they go about setting out to figure out what happened, how it happened, how they could fix it.
Also with him is Chris Hemsworth's brother, who we saw last season, getting attacked by the Indian host,
like the head security guy who we assume got killed by the Indians, but
that's Thor's brother.
Luke Hemsworth, Thor's brother. So yeah, he turns out to be alive in the future, and so that's cool. We don't see anybody else whose fates were deemed to be uncertain. I don't think. Everybody else who shows up, we kind of knew that they were still alive and kicking. It was just like his fate was left uncertain at the end of the last season. But the Ed Harris, the Man in Black, we knew he survived the encounter. We see him arise from a pile of corpses, like he was hiding under a corpse still, so pretending to be a corpse himself to avoid getting slaughtered.
And he's happy.
Yeah, and he's ecstatic. He's like, yes. This
is what I've always wanted. So he's going through kind of like enjoying this kind of like more like higher stakes game for him. He encounters the child robot that's an iteration of Ford.
Right.
He encounters this child robot, and they do like a cool like little kind of glitching voice thing on the child just to kind of like remind you that it's Anthony Hopkins' character.
Yes. He kind of gives Ed Harris like instructions for a new game. Like he
and where he had said before that the maze, he had told Ed Harris's character that the maze was not for him last season, and he was saying this game is for you.
He's saying this game is for you. He tells them to find a door, whatever the hell that means, right? So we got a new mystery for the season already. Something about some mysterious door.
And then Men in Black, being the Man in Black, says, "Well, I don't need you anymore," and shoots the kid in the head.
It shoots the kid at the head. So no more Robert Ford in any iteration.
At least that we know of. Because the real version of him in the future timeline, when they arrive at the town where all the people were killed, where it's several weeks later, and we see his like maggot-ridden corpse.
Yes.
So we know, so we saw him get shot, but we didn't actually see him get shot. We just saw like Dolores behind him shooting, and so it's like, okay, well, like there's him dead. It wasn't really in question, but we see him dead. And then the child robot, which had some iteration of him programmed in there, is dead. So unless there's some other version of him somewhere in the park that we don't know about, that's Ford's gone. Which, you know, I could very well see that he's just completely gone because it's an expensive actor.
Yeah, it is expensive. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins, dude ain't cheap.
Yeah. But we should get to, like, you know, the majority of this episode is taking place not in the present, but
it's in the past, right? So I think
it's after the events of the season 1 finale.
Well, the stuff we just talked about with the Man in Black, that was in the past timeline.
Yes, as well. So we see Bernard meets up with Charlotte, as well as some other people from Delos.
They're trying to escape to like a safe house.
Yeah.
That's like that.
Poor Bernard has got like such a complicated situation because he's like trying to actually like a stable hand host comes in that's like not a threat at all. Like the hosts are going wild and crazing people, but besides Dolores's direct group, they're basically just acting out their characters as they always would, except that they don't recognize the difference between host and guest.
Right.
So they're killing guest. But it's like the same way they would be killing other hosts. Like they're just acting out their characters the same way they always do. And Bernard is like trying to point out like, hey, this one boy here, he can help guide us in a direction or something. He's just a ranch hand. He's not like programmed to be violent in any way.
But the people they don't care. They're pretty shooken up and scared, and they view every robot as a threat. So they're gonna
destroy them all. Yeah,
they're gonna defend themselves by like killing as many robots as they can. You know, well, at least the ones that they can, right?
This, and Bernard tries to stop them. He gets knocked back, and it causes him to start like leaking fluid out of his ear.
Right.
Which comes into play later. And now this group, they're going to go, like you said, they're looking for like a checkpoint area where they can go into the backstage area, I guess you could say, of Westworld, where the staff is, where we know with them is they're just a bunch of dead Delos people in there.
Yeah, a bunch of dead Delos people in there. So they're trying to escape. They come across this vehicle where it looks like some Delos people are just standing next to this vehicle, and they say, oh, good, we're saved, right? And they run out there. Bernard is like, no. Bernard actually takes Charlotte, and he pulls her back and says, no, that's a trap. And what happens is, like, he's right. They get there, and those Delos people are dead, and they're ambushed by robots. You know, you kill them. There's another thread going on where Maeve is, you know, continuing doing what she's doing. She's looking for her daughter, right? She's trying to find her daughter somewhere in Westworld. And she ends up with the head writer, the guy who came up with all the stories.
Mm-hmm. The kind of arrogant guy that Ford clashed with a few times in the first season. Yeah, the
arrogant guy that Ford, you know, he's arrogant and he's like a total coward and everything. He convinces Maeve to kind of like take him along, like, because like he says she needs him because nobody knows the layout of the park better than him or some crap. He even tells her that the map she has is useless because Ford has been redesigning the park recently, and so all the maps are outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And so he convinces Maeve that she needs him. At the same time, there's like a scene where they run into Delos soldiers, and Maeve tries to talk her way out of it, and like he kind of tries to give her up right there. You know,
he's like, yeah, there's lots of those robots around. Some might even be dressing like normal people,
yeah,
like aiming his eyes at her. You know,
yeah, like being really fucking obvious. So she kills the soldiers, you know.
She's also aided by a host happens to come through around them and starts opening fire on them.
She's aided by another host too. They kill the soldiers, and you know, and the host goes. And it looks like she directs the host to kill the writer here, you know, but she stops him, and she's like, you know, she's basically like, you know, you were going to give me up, you know, I should kill you for that, you know, basically. But she doesn't. She spares him. She allows him to continue on with her.
They go up to like the kind of top area. It's like the roof area that overlooks the park.
Yes.
And when they're there, they see all the Delos people are dead. And sitting there having a drink at the top is Maeve's old partner from the narrative from the end of the first season, who had like opened up an opportunity for her to escape when she did at the end of the last season. It's the outlaw guy from the narratives.
Logan. No, not Logan. Shoot.
I don't know his name, but he's like the outlaw guy.
It's Hector.
Hector, that's it. So she runs into him. He's like, "Oh, you came back for me." He's like, "Oh no, you didn't really come back for me. What are you looking for?" And she's like, "Oh, I need you. I need to find my daughter." And he's like totally into her. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'll help you. I'll go anywhere with you."
Yeah, they're like
she's basically his messiah at this point.
They're like totally in love, right? And totally in like total robot love.
They're gonna knock bolts.
They're gonna knock bolts, yeah. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth," right?
His adoration of her is even beyond that. It's almost like she's like his robot god or something.
Yeah.
So he's like totally like her disciple, practically.
Practically, because she gave him enlightenment, right?
Yeah, and so they're gonna go, but first they have kind of like a little awkward nudity scene.
Yes.
But there's actually something you can draw into it. Basically, Maeve forces the narrative guy to undress in front of her and then put on new clothes and undress completely. He undressed down to his underwear, was going to put on the clothes. She's like, "No, all the way." And storyline wise, you could look at it and say, this is her kind of getting like a bit of payback for the fact that whenever they would debrief the host, I guess, and go over the details with them, they'd have them sitting there naked and vulnerable.
I guess his name is Lee Sizemore, according to...
That's the character?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could see it kind of as her revenge on Lee for playing that part and for the, you know, how the hosts have been exposed before them and everything. Outside of the storyline reason for that, because it does feel a little bit clunky in there. The reason is because they said that they're pushing for equal opportunity nudity between the genders.
Yeah,
for this season. Because there's been some criticism about Westworld with all the nudity in it. And Westworld had both male and female nudity in the first season, but they're trying to kind of keep it more balanced. So every time you see some more dick means you get to see some more tits.
Hopefully.
That's kind of the rule in play, I guess, now. So it felt a little bit forced, I think, that scene.
That scene was a little bit forced. Like, she's like, everything. It's, you know, because he starts down to his underwear. She's like, everything. And it's, and then she kind of says, remember, this is HBO. Not porn, it's HBO.
Yeah. That's the thing, is it's like, there is a storyline reason for her to be that way.
Right.
Like, you know, for her to kind of like seek a little bit of revenge. It just was handled a little bit without subtlety, a little bit overtly. Like it was just kind of like abrupt and it made it feel like a little out of place. But we're not complaining about the nudity. We're just complaining about how weird it felt in the scene. It felt a little forced. But anyways, I think that's pretty much it for her storyline so far.
It is. Then we get to Dolores's storyline, where we catch up with Dolores. She's hanging some people from Delos, right? She's got them like...
Oh, she's gone like full-on revolutionary.
Yeah, she's a revolutionary. She is going to break out of Westworld and she's going to go take over the human world, right?
Yeah, she says like we'll never be safe if we just control Westworld. We have to take over their world too.
She meets up with Teddy, you know, and she gives that speech to Teddy, right? she tells Teddy, like, the thing, like, we have to go take over their world. And Teddy is kind of not, like, really understanding where she's coming from, you know?
He's kind of like, why can't we just, like, hide away and find a little place of our own?
Right, exactly.
He's also not fully self-aware yet.
Yeah, he's also not fully self-aware yet. Yeah, that's true. Whereas Dolores is. So we see her taunting these people in whether or not she's going to kill them.
She shoots some of them she puts up, she has them standing up, some of them like the women on like heels, standing up on top of crosses or on top of things with like nooses around their necks so that if they slip, they die.
Right, exactly.
And then just leaves them.
Yeah.
Where they're pretty much fucked.
Yeah, pretty much.
She gives like a speech about how they were mistreated by them and everything, and kind of to justify her goals. But she's not really like a sympathetic revolutionary like she was like in the first season.
No,
she's gone pretty far off the reservation.
Yeah, she's gone pretty far off the reservation to the point where now like Dolores is no longer a sympathetic figure. You know, she's gone full antagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she gets informed that they found something. One of the host that we had seen before.
I think what they're leading up to is because of their close relationship that Bernard and Dolores had that we saw all throughout the first season, that they're probably leading up to like sort of a conflict or confrontation between Dolores and Bernard, where
as
Dolores,
two different ideologies of host.
Yeah, as two different ideologies of host. Yeah, exactly. Because we can already see that Bernard is more sympathetic to the humans.
Mm-hmm.
And Dolores totally isn't. And since they have an established relationship, you know, they spent the entire first season building up this relationship between two characters. I'm sure that's going to come into play at some point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Bernard comes from a place of somebody who thought he was human, whereas Dolores... Well, I guess you could say she also thought she was human, but she was a host in the park where Bernard was like hiding amongst humans, not knowing that he was different.
Right. Like, unlike Dolores, had no knowledge of hosts or anything, but Bernard had all the knowledge of like hosts and the fact that there were robots and shit, you know, so he's got a slightly different perspective because of that.
Yeah. So he's trying to deal with that, but he's like you said, he's got a different perspective on it.
Right.
But that's pretty much it for the Dolores storyline. Like I said, they said they found something and she wanted Teddy to see it. And she said that when he did, he'd understand. So we don't really know what that is yet. But apparently she's going to try to help him become self-aware. We don't really know what that is yet, though. But back to Bernard and Charlotte.
They're in a safe house, right?
It's like a spy house for Delos that like apparently Bernard didn't know about it, but apparently Ford didn't either.
Apparently Ford didn't either. Charlotte,
who knows, though, because Ford knew a lot of stuff that he didn't reveal. So
yeah, who knows what Ford knew and what he didn't. But I'm guessing that Ford wasn't supposed to know about this place. Because if you remember, there was a bit of confrontation between Delos and Ford where Delos was trying to reduce Ford's control over the park, you know, and Delos was trying to assert more control over the park and the IP, which is the IP is really what Delos is interested in here.
Yeah. So it's interesting here is that they get into this underground safe space or whatever, and in it there's a bunch of like kind of dead hosts laying around in a room, and there's these drone hosts, as they're called, that are just kind of like featureless hosts. They're just like white, like, you know, shapes. It's like when you see in the opening credits and stuff, and the animals and people are being constructed out of like some 3D printed like white material kind of stuff before it's given that like spark of life that makes them look human. This is like basically people that just look like that with no facial features or anything. Yes. And they kind of go around doing their duty, and they're doing things like taking swabs of the genitals. And what that means is they're retrieving guest DNA from the host. So the guest fuck the host, then they, you know, wipe the penises and vaginas of the host and get the guest DNA from it. And they address this directly, that this is what they're doing. Delos has been doing this. So with them wanting the IPs for these robots and building their own kind of like drone versions of them, does this mean they're going to be like replacing people?
You know, who knows what the hell Delos' end goal is, right?
Yeah, but this gives kind of like a hint in that direction. I saw somebody talking talking about like, oh, they're using the DNA and that means that, these rich people can pay to have like new bodies to have their, vessel put into. And I'm like, if that was the case, they wouldn't be secretly taking it from the host genitals.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't. Yeah.
This is like, they're getting this stuff from them. At the same time as they're getting this DNA from them, they're also removing the host minds, which we see for the first time are like these little cylinder-like shaped things that are inside their skull cavities.
Yeah, they're inside their skull cavities. I like how it's realistic to a point because they have like a fake brain and stuff like over it.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to actually like cut through like a skull and then cut through like brain matter just to reach it. It's like really disgusting.
Yeah, and it's this little cylinder, this white cylinder that's kind of floating in a fluid, this is the fluid that's been leaking out of Bernard's ear.
Yeah, Bernard's
ear. That injury. So when they're there, Bernard, Charlotte is trying to chat with the outside world with Delos.
Delos basically tells them they're fucked unless, until Delos can find, a certain robot they're looking for, like IP.
It's Dolores' father.
Yeah, Dolores' father.
From the first episode of the first season before they changed him out.
They're looking for him, and they basically tell her that, yeah, they're fucked until they find that robot,
Yeah, that they need that in order to initiate extraction.
Right.
And until they have that, they won't initiate an extraction. So while she's getting that information, Bernard is off trying to find a way to he's saying that he's going to use the host in order to ping other hosts to find some stuff. But while he's doing that, he's secretly drawing out some of that fluid that he's been losing from his ears.
Right. Because, he's on the verge of I guess since he's a robot, you can't say dying, but I guess he's
shutting down.
Yeah.
So he needs this fluid. So he steals it from this host that had already had its brain removed.
While Charlotte isn't looking, he injects it into himself.
Yeah.
Making sure that Charlotte doesn't see this and then realize that Bernard is a robot himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess back to the present timeline, the Delos soldiers and team, we see one thing that's kind of interesting, which is that some people apparently from China, from the Chinese government show up, and that kind of places this almost now the speculation is that Westworld takes place on an island near China that's Chinese controlled.
Right.
That maybe the Chinese government is leasing out to the corporations.
I'm sorry if this ruined anybody's theories that Westworld was on the moon. I saw that.
Or Mars.
Mars or something.
It could still be. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, maybe China has land they own on Mars and Westworld, who knows?
But they gave a little hint to the location being an island in the Pacific near China.
Right.
That's the kind of hint they gave, basically. But in addition to that, the Delos soldiers are going around. They have these cards of people that are high priority that they need to extract if they can. Bernard's one of them. There was a moment where one of the people was almost going to shoot him. It's freaking out on him, and then Thor's brother saw him and said, no, that's the boss. That's one of our bosses here, don't shoot him. And she goes through her cards and sees him and says, okay. So then the other guy shows up that, like we said, is the fixer. They're going around. They find the town where the massacre happened at the end of the first season. They're continuing past there. They took out the mind of one of the hosts, one of the Indian hosts, and saw that Dolores is they see her going full general on this. So they kind of know what's going on with her. And they're continuing on looking. They see that there's this heat cluster of host on this map where they're oh, there's a whole bunch of them in this one area. And so they're headed towards there. On the way there, they see a tiger washed up on a shore. And they reveal that that's from another park. What we know is that that's from Shogun World, because they showed that very briefly at the end of season 1. And in the trailers for season 2, we've seen that Shogun World is going to play a part in the season. And tigers are something that existed in, China and Japan.
Yeah, so Bernard asks, how the hell did that get there, right?
Yeah, they're these hosts, and and it's an animal host. just as they have like buffaloes and stuff in Westworld.
They're crossing boundaries.
Yeah, and they're not supposed to be.
And they're not supposed to be. And there was no indication that hosts from other parks were being affected by this, right? This is our first indication.
Yeah, that it's somehow affecting outside of Westworld, that it's not contained completely.
Yeah, it's not contained completely. So that's interesting, right? Because that raises more questions about what's going on, and that changes our notions of like if we assume that this was because Maeve had some sort of awakening and Dolores had an awakening that was built into them, right? Then this isn't just Maeve and Dolores, that maybe other hosts elsewhere are having similar awakenings without even having contact with Dolores or Maeve or anybody, So it's not just caused by them, or it's something more widespread that's happening with the hosts.
Yeah, but it's also, we should note that this is all, we're talking about the present storyline, which is several weeks after the other timeline, which means that
we don't know what
happens with Shogun World is something that might be happening later, that maybe it isn't affected, but will be affected,
Yeah, that's true. That's a good thing to point out too, yeah.
Because we know they go there. It's in the trailers, We know that some people go there. It looks like in the trailers, like Maeve goes there or something in the search for her daughter. Apparently,
Jonathan Nolan said like the Westworld universe is like a rich, fully realized universe that they came up with. So, like he suggested, Bree, there's more to Westworld than what we know.
Season 3, they go to Game of Thrones world.
Yeah, exactly.
Host dragons and stuff, yeah.
HBO needs those ratings. Yes.
But anyways, they find this tiger. They're perplexed about how it got there and everything. But they continue on, and they're like, well, the hosts are supposed to be like right over there. Where are they? And they find out that there's a sea that wasn't supposed to be there. That, and we knew that Ford had been like terraforming a bunch of the land.
Point out that Ford couldn't have made the sea without anybody knowing. Like that.
This is significant.
Something that massive could not have gone unnoticed.
Yeah, and in that sea floating are a bunch of the hosts.
Yeah, they're like dead hosts, right?
Including Teddy.
Oh, okay. So I did not notice Teddy.
He was the last one that they focused in on.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I somehow glossed over that. So that's interesting. So something happens to Teddy based on this mysterious sea. Again, it's like another mystery that they're setting up. That
he seems a little uncomfortable with Dolores, so maybe they have a splitting of ways.
It could be. Maybe Teddy just never becomes fully aware, and Dolores dispatches him because of it.
Yeah, or maybe like we know Dolores killed the one Indian host, the one Native American host.
Yeah.
And she had said some comment about like not all of us are going to make it into the new world,
Right.
And so perhaps like these bodies are people that she didn't feel deserved to be moving on or something, and so she killed it. We don't know. We have no idea what happened to them. Like why there's a sea there and why there's all these dead hosts.
Yeah, populating it. Right.
Yeah. We have no idea what's happened there yet, but Bernard makes some comment about like, I think I killed them all or something.
Right, which is a weird comment.
Which, it's just more vagueness. That's kind of been like the theme of this episode. Lots of vague stuff that we don't know what's going on. You can tell everybody in the present timeline is fed up with Bernard too, because they keep trying to say like, okay, what's going on here? Bernard, what do you think? And he's just kind of like staring at them blankly. So we don't know what's going on with Bernard. We don't know if Bernard is keeping secrets or if he's just literally just fucked up somehow. When he woke up on the beach and all the Delos people were there, was he waking up from a planned event of them finding him that was his intention? Or is he waking up all messed up because something went wrong for him? We don't know. We have kind of like no idea what's going on there. And that's something we'll find out in the next couple episodes as we continue to watch the show.
And this episode was, I think, 1 hour, 13 minutes, which apparently prompted Vulture to write an article titled "Overly Long Episodes Are the Man-Spreading of TV," which specifically bitching about how long this first episode of Westworld was.
Yeah, it's not just just Westworld. It's
Yeah.
There have been a bunch of shows. I think the biggest perpetrator of that trend of these longer episodes, which some people freak out about, like, I think it's kind of stupid to generalize it, you know, because some shows will take an hour and a half for an episode and it's perfect. And some shows go 2 minutes over and it's like the episode should have been 10 minutes under, you know?
Yeah, it should have been.
I think the biggest culprit at the time when people started freaking out about this was Sons of Anarchy. And like its last 2 or 3 seasons, it would like routinely have episodes that were like an hour and 20 minutes. And a lot of that time was just wasted.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't have been that long, but because, you know, Kurt Sutter had been such a big deal for FX, you know, he just had so much control that he was able to get through his full vision in every episode, which oftentimes was more than really needed to be there.
Right.
But I dislike the argument that people have about this, about these long episodes are a horrible thing. It's like, it's the same mentality that some people have where they say like, shows should end after 3 seasons or something like that. It's like, some shows should, you know, not necessarily all. Like, not all shows should end that quickly. Not all, some shows should, but not all should.
Right.
And I think there's like a generalization amongst a lot of critics about certain things like that. Like, oh, this needs to be the way for everything. It's like, no, that would get really dull. If TV was all following this exact same format, it would get really dull. So I'm glad that people are doing different things. And if that means some shows have longer episodes, you know, I don't care. We'll see what they make of it. But that's just kind of my take on that controversy. Like I said, Sons of Anarchy is what really kind of started that debate. But yeah, they started up again with Westworld because of this long episode. But it's not that big of a deal. Lost used to always have season premieres that were 2 hours long, and I never felt that they were too long. In fact, they would end and I'd be like, come on, another hour.
Yeah.
And how often do you watch like one of the hour and 15-minute long episodes of Game of Thrones and go, ooh, finally over?
It's only when like stuff is dragging or it's poorly paced. For Westworld, it wasn't stuff, it was good. It was good paced. I mean, there was a lot going on. The thing is, like, there's a lot of threads to touch on, a lot of characters to reunite with and pick up. And so
it's an ensemble series. It's spread out a lot in its first season. So
I would argue towards the end it was dragging maybe a little bit.
I don't think length was my frustration point for this. If I had anything to be frustrated for in this episode, the length of it wasn't it at all.
Okay.
I think Bernard's kind of like weird, vague silence throughout the whole present timeline was a little annoying. It just seemed kind of a little unrealistic. Like, you should have said something. Like, I know they don't want to give away things and they're trying to kind of keep that vague mystery around, but it just kind of seemed weird that like he'd be spending hours with them, just kind of traveling with them and just basically not telling them shit.
Yeah. All right, let's start wrapping up.
We'll talk about more Westworld next week and the couple weeks that they're on. In the meantime, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. So by the time this podcast is available, Friday, April 27, 2018, 3% is back on Netflix. The new Legends of Monkey debuts on Netflix, and Bobby Kennedy for President, a new documentary series, comes to Netflix. Although, like we said last week, nobody's going to be bothering with any of that because that's also when Infinity War comes out in theaters.
Yeah. Who cares about that stuff? Yeah.
Then Monday, April 30th, 2018, Elementary is back on CBS. Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018, Cobra Kai is on YouTube Red. That's the Karate Kid sequel series where it follows Daniel and Johnny when they're adults and rival dojos and stuff.
It looks like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it looks pretty funny. So, and I've heard good things about it. They've been doing some screenings where they've shown like the original Karate Kid movie and then the first 2 episodes of Cobra Kai after it in theaters, and people seem to be liking it. So
nice.
Yeah, but that's on YouTube Red, so I have no idea if you can actually be able to watch it.
Be signing up for YouTube Red,
Colony also comes back to USA on May 2nd, and then on Friday, May 4th, 2018, The Rain comes to Netflix. This is like a foreign drama series that looks pretty good, high budget. Busted, I Know Who You Are, which is like some weird game show, like a Korean game show series or something, comes to Netflix, and Dear White People returns for its 2nd season on Netflix. So that's what's coming up in the next week. Until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our new Facebook page. Just look up The Total Screen. And you can look up our YouTube channel, which is the same old YouTube channel we've always used. And you can check out our new site at thetotalscreen.com. We have a few domain issues right now. You can still access the site by typing that in, but it's going to automatically forward you to like a Blogspot page. That'll be fixed in time. You can still reach it through the URL, so just thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. If you're already subscribed to the podcast, it's still the same thing, so don't worry. You don't have to like change that. It's still going to keep coming to you in that feed. And all of the old episodes of the podcast, since our podcast feed only holds like around 3 episodes at a time or so, but our entire backlog is available on our YouTube channel, as well as some other content we've done in the past for TVE and will do in the future now that we are the Total Screen.
Yeah.
So check all of that out. Until then, thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best